In a settlement 20 years in the making, the city of Boston is set to pay more than $2.5 million over the use of a drug hair test. It disproportionately turns out false positives for black officers. The lawsuit began back in 2005 after 2 officers were fired, 1 was suspended, and 1 police cadet was prevented from joining the BPD at all after testing positive for cocaine, despite maintaining that they had never used the drug. Attorneys for the group says that clients' lives and careers were completely derailed. One of those attorneys is the litigation director for the Lawyers for Civil Rights, Orrin Sellstrom, joining me now, along with Jeffrey Lopes, president of the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers, or MAMLIO. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Appreciate you being here. First, I want to ask you, Jeff, about what is this going to mean to the members of MAMLIO, but the officers at the BPD, you think?
I think this sends a message that we are at a place in society where we're going to get true justice for things that have historically held us back as a community of officers of color. And we're at a place now where we're just trying to get to a place of inclusivity, where we feel included, where we can grow just like everyone else, and where we can feel like we're a part of a society that really cares about issues that impact black and brown folks. This is a case that has gone on for way too long, has been fought by multiple administrations, and here we are today with a victory. Yeah,
you know, we're talking about, what, we counted 3 mayors and 1 interim mayor. Orrin, this was a lengthy litigation for this outcome.
Absolutely, and as Jeff said, it really went on far too long. It was really in the months after the hair test was first instituted, way back in the early 2000s, when folks like MAMLIO were raising the alarm bells saying this test is unreliable, it should not be used, it's disproportionately falling on African American officers, and yet it took almost 20 years of litigation to get to the victory where we are today. That's way too long. It should have happened much sooner.
So talk to me a little bit, for folks who are not familiar, which I'm not sure how folks aren't, but there's always some folks who may not have been following this case as closely as all of us have. What were some of the circumstances leading up to this lawsuit?
So the basic problem with this hair test is that while it can identify drug particles in the hair, it can't tell how they got there. And so there are 2 ways that drug particles can get into the hair: through internal ingestion, which is through drug use, but also through external contamination. It can come from outside, and it turns out that drug particles are quite prevalent just in our everyday environment. Something like half of all dollar bills in circulation have drug particles on them, and those can get into the hair externally. And this hair test did not reliably identify how those particles got into hair. And it was a particular problem with black officers because of the nature and texture of black hair, as well as grooming products that are commonly used by African Americans. The test disproportionately produced false positives for African American officers. So it was unreliable, it was discriminatory, and it should never have been put into practice in the first place.
Jeff, I'm sure when a police officer, especially a police officer of color, walks into a case or responds to a call, the last thing they want to be worried about is if their hair is going to hold on to whatever drug particles might be in that space.
Absolutely. We all know that police officers walk into situations oftentimes where there can be prevalence of drugs, where people may be using drugs can be in the air, in areas where you're responding where there's contamination of some sort. And at any point in a police officer's day, they can come across drug particles, right? Whether it's responding to a 911 call, just engaging with a citizen on the street, or even just having lunch and sitting at a restaurant. And so police officers want to feel protected. They want to feel like when they're doing their job, it's not going to adversarially impact them later on. And that's what happened here, right? And the hair test, it cut out a portion of your hair. So if you're someone who historically has had issues growing hair, et cetera, your hair getting cut off once a year had an impact on you and your life.
So every year officers had to submit to this test?
Yeah, so essentially every single year officers' hair was getting cut by the Occupational Health Services Department, who would submit it to a lab.
And so was that something that, was this something where in the culture of the BPD, like black officers were ever concerned about?
I think all along black officers were concerned because of the false positives that were alerted early on. But also, we know that certain people have struggles with growing hair, and I know it's always an issue for black women on the police department with their hair being cut and having issues with growing that hair back and really having it impact their everyday lives.
Did it ever cast like a stigma? Like we talked about a cadet, we talked about two officers being fired, one being suspended. When those things would happen, I imagine there would be a lot on the force as folks were talking about it and things like that. Now, is there a sense of vindication because perhaps that person was seen differently after testing positive?
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, once you test positive for drug use, there is a stigma that comes along with that, right? So it's not like you can just walk away with that and say everything's been fixed and that people aren't going to look at you a certain way. There are many people out there who don't believe that this is the case, that you can get a false positive, right? But I think where we are today is really showing that science has proved this. Not only we're saying it as an organization, we have our attorneys that are saying it in a court. We have, experts who have come out and said this test is not accurate and positive. And so we're happy that, people who were able to return back to work were able to return back to work, and that today they're working alongside their peers and really showing a message that we're going to be strong through this. We're not going to let a system that has historically marginalized people of color take away our opportunity to serve and protect the citizens of Boston.
So what happens next? Like there is this settlement, there's a monetary settlement with the BPD, the city of Boston, but is there any other direction that or steps that the department or the force has to take?
Well, the main change happened in 2020, which is that the city abandoned use of the hair test altogether. So it's not being used now, and it's not going to be used going forward. And that was a significant victory that our clients felt was very important. They knew what this test and the false positives had done to them, and they didn't want to see that happen to anybody else. So in 2020, as part of the movement to end racism, the city abandoned the hair test. Now they have finally come forward and compensated the individuals whose lives were completely turned upside down by the false positives in the first place.
Are there any other cities or even states that implement a similar test? And could this have precedent in any other cases that may be brought? I'm not sure if
there are still places where a version of this test is still in use, and I know that because at Lawyers for Civil Rights we get calls from people from across the country that read about this case, this victory, and say, hey, that happened to me as well. So it is still in use in other places, fortunately not in the city of Boston.
Could this case then be precedent in other cases?
Absolutely. And the science that Jeff referred to that came out through the course of the litigation is something that people look very closely at now. The fact that the test cannot reliably determine whether drugs are in the hair through ingestion or external contamination, the fact that courts have now held that it is scientifically unreliable, that is all very powerful precedent that is used across the country at this point.
Jeff, I know that, police departments across the country, even the city of Boston, looking to recruit more folks onto the force. Do you think having the abolishment of this test in 2020 being gone, and then now this case, this civil case, this being decided, do you think that that's going to help create an environment where you're going to be able to get more folks on the force?
Yeah, I think any barrier that you can take away from recruiting more officers of color, more female officers, and really bringing in an inclusive working environment is going to be key. I think here where we see a victory is that we know now that we're not going to have false positives with the hair test, right? I think we're at a place where people can feel confident in taking the current urine test and feel comfortable that they're not going to get a false positive. And I think that tells people that, they're going to have an equal chance and equal opportunity of becoming a police officer in the city of Boston.
I know that there's been other conversations around the test that you take to get on the force and other things that could have discriminatory outcomes or disproportionately discriminatory outcomes for cadets of color. Do we see this as one step of many to make sure that this is an equitable system here?
Absolutely. I think this is just one step of the many hurdles that officers of color have faced in the police department. The recent promotional exam settlement speaks victory to some of the issues that have been presented with promotion in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think historically police departments have always blamed civil service and said civil service was the reason why they could not promote officers of color to more superior ranks. But we know today that that's not the case. We know that today that officers of color are doing better in some of these exams. Now that some police departments have changed the exam structure, and the city of Boston changed their exam structure. And police departments really have to lean into making sure that they truly want to get to a place of inclusivity. There are a lot of other barriers that come into place, like seniority and other measures that police departments use for promotion that historically have disenfranchised officers of color. But we know today there is an opportunity to make sure that at all levels, officers of color are represented, not only when they walk in the door, but also as they climb the ladder within policing. And, the city of Boston just recently celebrated one of the most diverse police classes that graduated from the Boston Police Academy, but that's just one step to getting us to a true place of equity. It's now how do we get people promoted to the rank of sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and beyond to make sure that the police department is inclusive all around, because that not only helps internally, but it helps how we engage with the communities that we serve.
For sure. And Orrin, I know that you field a lot of these phone calls where officers even other departments. The fire department is not without its challenges. We're talking about making sure that there's equity and balance and diversity and things like that. Do you see this sort of creating momentum to create a more equitable space along all sort of civil service positions?
Absolutely. What it really shows and what this conversation really reveals is that it's got to be an all-hands-on-deck effort if we're really serious about diversity in the police department, in the fire department, and in other institutions. It's got to go beyond just the platitudes of saying we value diversity, but looking at diversity in all aspects, from how people get into the system, what outreach is done to bring people onto the force, what barriers exist to promotional opportunities, how are people being retained. All of those aspects have to be evaluated and analyzed and worked at. And this victory that we've achieved here is one piece of that. We hope it brings more momentum to move into some of those other places in the future as well.
All right. Well, Orrin Sellstrom and Jeffrey Lopes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.